Hello there. Will the Tory MP who didn't attend a party during lockdown please stand up? So it's now alleged that Theresa May attended a lockdown-breaking party. You know, the Theresa May that criticised Boris Johnson so heavily over Partygate. And it appears that this party was a second one that Baroness Anne Jenkin has attended. You know, the wife of the deputy chairman of the committee that sunk Boris Johnson, Bernard Jenkin, who himself is alleged to have been at one of the parties too. Yes, in another scoop for Guido Fawkes, there was another do, a so-called socially distanced party, when such things were outlawed, to celebrate the birthday of the Women to Win campaign set up by Anne Jenkin and Theresa May to get more women into Parliament. And Guido says Theresa May was there in person at the event, while Boris Johnson attended via Zoom, as did David Cameron. To be fair, it arguably started off as a sort of work do, but somehow one image on Guido's site shows people without masks but with drinks. But of course the only culpable person in all of this will be Boris Johnson, because he must have suspected that this was a lockdown-breaking party, so he must be guilty. The attendees and others who knew about this will all be ignored, of course. And looking at the photos, my recollection of what a 2-metre distance looks like is definitely larger than it looks there. Must be the lens the photographer used, I suppose. Then there's the no masks bit. And we're still told that our political betters were all really worried about the health emergency, to the point that they locked everyone down and trashed the economy. And more importantly, trashed the lives of millions. But they, of course, get a special pass, don't they? I'm sure that if they thought this thing was that deadly, they'd have retreated to an air-filtered bunker somewhere. And given she's a type 1 diabetic, Theresa May would, of course, have been following all the precautions all the time, wouldn't she? Now be in no doubt that this Tory government and the next Labour government, led by the Westminster blob of civil servants, will continue to run down our armed forces until they can say that there's only one route left, joining the EU Defence Pact, PESCO. And then Brussels will have total control over our foreign and defence policies. But those charlatans in Whitehall will pass this transfer of power off as a money-saving measure. And there appears to be only one MP asking serious questions about this, Andrew Bridgen.
Andrew Bridgen.
14, Mr Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Good afternoon. The UK applied to the Permanent Structured Cooperation Military Mobility Project to help shape EU military transport procedures and infrastructure, addressing impediments to moving military personnel and assets across Europe at pace. We are negotiating the technical terms of our participation in the form of an administrative agreement, and we have reached agreement on the majority of the text.
Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Sir Richard Dearlove, former head of MI6, has given evidence to House committees on this issue, and he questioned why we were joining this and who had authorised it. He also stated that membership of these European Union defence structures are not an à la carte menu where the UK can choose what it wants and reject what it doesn't. It's very much a take it or leave it, all or nothing situation. Does the Minister agree with Sir Richard's assessment?
Well, Mr Speaker, conspiracy isn't as rife as the honourable gentleman seems to think. You can indeed choose which parts of PESCO you wish to be in, and the Mobility Project, which coordinates the development of infrastructure for the movement of NATO weapons and platforms across Europe, seems to be a pretty good thing on which the UK should seek to cooperate with the EU on.
David Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As my right honourable friend has mentioned, the UK at the moment is considering acceding only to the military mobility element of PESCO. There are, however, over 60 separate elements. Can my right honourable friend indicate whether the government is considering joining any of those other elements?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we'll consider them on a case-by-case basis. Where there is merit and where it is in the UK interests to work with the European Union to the advantage of NATO and our own national interest, we will, of course, do so. But we won't do so blindly out of habit, only when it's in our interests.
And while Bridgen's questions were being answered by Defence Minister James Heappey, who was saying that there's nothing to worry about at all, the Defence Secretary sat to his right, nodding and smiling in agreement. But when the former head of MI6 is putting out warnings, and more importantly, we would only presumably go into the EU with battle forces if NATO was also involved. And Heappey himself said, the mobility project, which coordinates the development of infrastructure for the movement of NATO weapons and platforms across Europe, seems to be a pretty good thing on which the UK seeks to cooperate with the EU on. So if it is about NATO, why does the UK need its own bespoke arrangements? Why isn't NATO heading this up to arrange a NATO-wide access plan? Answer: because it's just about the EU and the UK working together on the EU's terms. And when this EU-UK agreed text they're working towards sees the light of day, I bet it's all one way with procurement and stuff like that, i.e. we buy EU stuff to get this done. And are we expecting their armies to be given instant access to the UK too? And large amounts of troops can be moved by train, can't they? You know, like HS2, especially if it's joined to the Channel Tunnel, etc. Don't trust them. And now we learn that the so-called Mr. Rules, the Labour leader Keir Starmer, might not be quite as pure as the driven snow that we're led to believe he is. But for some reason it's taken a decade to find out. According to a Guardian report, Keir Starmer failed to consult with the parliamentary watchdog that should authorise any post-government work he did for 2 years after leaving his post at the Crown Prosecution Service. It seems from the report that he did a Boris Johnson. He left the CPS and started doing part-time work for a top London law firm, reportedly earning 100 grand for it. But The Guardian claims he did not talk to the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments about it first. And there are still questions about how Sue Gray was recently recruited to become Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff. One rule for the rest of us, etc. And the SNP accounts get even murkier. A Freedom of Information reply that the Electoral Commission made to the Sunday Mail contains information on an alleged impermissible legacy donation to the party. But there doesn't seem to be a record of it being repaid to the donor's estate within 30 days as required by law. And that is a donation that we're told the SNP denied ever getting, with an SNP spokesperson saying, "No donation was ever received, and so there was no donation to return." Now, according to the Daily Record, a sister publication to the Sunday Mail, the then SNP Chief Exec, Peter Murrell, sent an email to the Electoral Commission asking for some guidance. I guess we won't be the first ones to receive a legacy gift from someone overseas who isn't or hasn't been on the electoral register within the required timescales. But given it's a first for us, is there an expert paper on what to do? It said. To which the Commission answered that unless the donor had been on the electoral roll in the 5 years prior to death, they had 30 days to return the gift to the donor or their estate. And it seems that Mr. Murrell acknowledged that. So was a gift offered and they turned it down? If so, why not say so? Or was a cheque sent that was returned unbanked? If so, why not just say so? But in the usual SNP way, it's a mind-your-own-business sort of response. And the Daily Record also says, it's understood that bequeathments like these are forming part of the major police probe into the whereabouts of more than £600,000 of donations to the SNP, which were meant to be ring-fenced for the independence campaigning. And with Nicola Sturgeon saying she can only talk about innocence where she's concerned, not that of Peter Murrell, her husband, then you do have to wonder who will be pushing who under the battle bus. I am only speaking for myself, she said. Richard.
More revelations coming out about MPs breaking the rules they set for us during lockdown. Many of you suffered financially and didn't get to say goodbye to loved ones for the last time because the rules were given to us by these people. Keep paying your taxes. Come on, keep complying, folks. You must maintain these people in their positions of power with your acquiescence. At all times, we the people must keep in mind how important it is for us to hand over our rights and power to those who are better than us. And we must not for one moment, let our trust in them slip. We have a moral duty to believe the information given to us via impeccable and trusted sources, such as the mainstream media like the BBC and the government. Yes. Please, no thinking that injustice has occurred. It hasn't. Just keep your head down and obey. Do not listen to the pundits that say you have the right, to question authorities, and don't listen to these ridiculous conspiracy theory pundits. We must forgive and forget the misdemeanours of our leaders and accept any hardships we endured over the past 3 years because it is the right thing to do. Support whichever of the two main political parties you wish and ignore any fledgling anti-establishment political parties that may cause an upheaval for the establishment, which is, of course, it is there to protect us, the establishment is. Now, don't forget it. Do as you are told. If you are finding it hard to pay your bills, you should go without your necessities. You should lose your home and happily relinquish your accumulated assets to the state, who will redistribute them fairly. Pay your taxes and comply at all times. You have a moral duty to support the agenda and ideologies presented to you as good and just by the authorities. It is your duty. You must comply. Anyway, what do you lot think about what has been said in today's video? Don't forget to tune in tomorrow for Jeff's midday video, and both Jeff and I will see you again tomorrow at 7 p.m.